Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. I really appreciate you listeners. I love you guys a lot. And thank you so much for listening to this channel because you're really going to enjoy the story tonight. And for those of you who are romantically inclined, I think this story is definitely going to be up your alley. So let's get started. It's called Lover's Lane and Bigfoot. Hello and good evening or morning, wherever you are in the world, to you, Sarah, and to all your listeners. Is it not wonderful that no matter where we are in this vast universe of ours, from North America, Canada, Australia to Africa and the Middle East, we could all come together tonight and listen to this very same story? It really is quite a sobering reality, isn't it? Let's get started with my story, because that's the reason I'm here in the first place. It was in the early 80s, in 1982 to be more exact, and I was so in love with the most beautiful girl in my class at school. Her name was Arabella Autumn Jolina. I know it's a long name, but it was as unique as she was. She had beautiful fair skin that was so white and translucent, and it was almost porcelain in its perfection. She had blue eyes, as well as wavy dark hair with red in it. She was stunning and very bohemian in her manner and in the way she dressed. While everyone dressed in the same 80s fashion at the time, Arabella was always different and would put clothes together in an unusual and unique way that was so eye-catching and alluring that even the girls in school would try to mimic her style. The one thing that was unusually mature about her was she never cared what anybody thought about her. She spoke her mind, which is a rare quality in a teenage girl, certainly at that time for sure. Some of the confident, handsome boys in the school were very attracted to her beauty and confidence. At the time, I was painfully shy, skinny, and I was definitely not sought after by the girls at school. As you can imagine, even though I fancied Arabella so very much, I considered her out of my league. I knew there was no way a girl as unique and clever and as beautiful as her would give me a second glance. I was sure of that. Imagine my surprise when I found out that the most popular sought-after boy in the class, the biggest catch as far as every single girl was concerned, whose name was Toby Billing, and he was a hell of a handsome guy, the captain of virtually every sports team, and to boot he came from a wealthy family. Another asset or a string that he had to his bow was he drove a very fancy bright red 1980 Corvette sports car at the time. What was there not to like as far as every young girl was concerned? Anyway, this so-called chick magnet, so to speak, had asked Arabella on a date. And no one could believe it, but she had knocked him back and blatantly said to him, "Toby, you're not my type. Don't waste your time with me." This revelation went around the school like wildfire, and down every passageway and in every open locker was the whispering of students, horrified that the school stud had been well and truly rejected. This brush-off was an enigma to all the girls who couldn't understand it, and a real turn-on for the boys who were all very eager to try, win and pursue the elusive and unobtainable Arabella. Even Toby, who had been rejected by Arabella, continued to drool over her like a puppy that longed for a bone and wasn't going to give up in a hurry. On one spring morning, I still remember the day as if it was yesterday, this beautiful, gorgeous girl approached me. It was Arabella, of course. I was sitting at my desk during morning recess as I was trying to do my math homework. I watched her in awe as she shook her mane of ravishing red curls and smiled at me with the warmest smile that I have ever seen. "I think you and I should go out on a date," she said. I was in shock. This beautiful girl that every guy in the school wanted to date was looking at Mr. Skinny with his thin body and boyish face and hazel brown eyes. What on earth did she see in me? Was she blind? Why would you want to date me? I asked her. You're my type, she said, handing me her home phone number. Do not forget to give me a call tonight. I'll be expecting it, she said. And with that she turned around and marched off, leaving me looking floored. Had I heard right, I thought? Did she really want to date me? Or was this just an incredible dream that I was going to wake up from and realize that I'd just been dreaming? What did she want with you? Asked Toby, who'd been eyeing our conversation with distinct displeasure. I was embarrassed. How was I going to tell this guy that this beautiful girl fancied me over him? I knew he wouldn't take it well, and so I lied and said, I'm not sure. I'm not quite sure what she wants. It's a bit strange, really. That evening I phoned her, and believe me, I put down the phone 3 times every time she answered, because I felt so afraid and so intimidated. Finally, I plucked up the courage, and I don't know how I did it, but I did. I knew it was you, she scolded. Why did you keep putting the phone down on me? I could hear you breathing. We arranged to meet the following evening. My parents are cool, she said. As long as you've got me back by 11, they'll be fine. Where shall we go? I asked, half expected that she wanted me to take her to a diner for a milkshake and a burger. I'm a cheap date, she said. I don't want you to take me on to anywhere to eat. I just want you to take me on a drive. Somewhere adventurous and beautiful. Somewhere in nature. That's what I'd like. Wow, I thought. She's cheap, romantic, and practical. I really like her, I reflected. And it's not just her appearance. We drove to a beautiful secluded spot in Montana. But I will not tell you where, because even today it's as beautiful as it was all those years ago, which in itself is a miracle. And so I'm not going to divulge any details in order to keep this place strictly my own and nobody else's. This is so beautiful, she said, opening the car door and peering up at the starry sky, pointing out all the constellations. She reached for my hand and took it with a firm grip, and we walked around the wooded forest clearing. It was a lovely walk, and I was as nervous as hell. I'm not going to lie. Thoughts were racing through my head at 1,000 miles an hour. Should I put my arm around her? Should I kiss her? I was terrified of rejection, and as I had no experience with girls, worse still, I'd never kissed anyone before. Suppose I got it horribly wrong. Stop overthinking, she laughed, looking directly at me. Just be spontaneous, and everything will flow. It always does, you know. I was shocked. Had she read my thoughts, I wondered? At that very moment, we heard a whistling sound coming from the woods. Arabella nudged me. Hear that? Some weirdos walking around in the forest at the dead of night. Who could it be? I had to acknowledge that it was weird, and I did wonder who it was. I confess that I've never heard someone whistle that well. It sounded like they were whistling a tune that they knew by heart. It's a happy tune, isn't it? Laughed Arabella. The whistle, I mean. I agreed. It was very uplifting. We heard the whistling sound coming towards us, and the feet that accompanied the sound appeared to belong to a person that must have been extremely heavy, I thought. We could hear the sounds of twigs snapping and the rustle of leaves being brushed against a big body. The person, whoever he was approaching us, and soon. I was trying to encourage Arabella to get into the car. Let's go back, because the guy who was whistling, I told her, could very well be a psycho, or not right in the head. Don't be silly, she laughed. Let's just hide behind that bush, she said, pointing to some hedgerow. I'm dying to see who this whistler is. I was not pleased with the idea, because I was not nearly as curious as Arabella. I was more level-headed, but I wanted to please my potential girlfriend, and I was not about to refuse her any request. I was certainly glad that we'd parked my car at the left of the clearing, where it was invisible from where we were hiding, which would mean that the whistler, whoever he was, would not suspect that anyone was around. It was then that we saw him, What the heck, I thought in horror. What in the world are we looking at? I kid you not, Sarah, this creature was over 10 foot in height, and not less, and I can assure you of that. He was about 1,000 pounds in weight, which is why for a moment I did wonder if he was a bear. But the humanness of his gait made that thought impossible to consider. At this stage I was only seeing the back of the creature, and in the moonlight I could see that his hair colour was similar to Arabella's, kind of dark with red flecks in it. When he turned around I had the shock of my life. He had a primate kind of King Kong look about him, but there was a humanness to him as well. The creature continued to whistle the beautiful tune, and we were both mesmerized and yet horrified by him, because don't get me wrong, we felt like we were facing a predator of some kind, just as any of you would feel the same way if you were facing a lion or a rhino. Next to him, our bodies were puny and pathetic by comparison. In one swipe, he could have taken our heads off just like that with effortless ease. His whole body was covered in hair, with the exception of his knees that were almost hairless, and of course there were hairless areas on his face. I could not see his face in detail, but his head was cone-shaped and literally sat on top of a humongous pair of shoulders, so it was almost like he had no neck, if you know what I mean. One thing that really got my attention was the span of his chest that was 4.5 to 5 feet across. He was exceedingly broad. His hairy, heavy, muscular arms were long and reached well beyond his knees and definitely made the school hunk Toby seem pathetically puny. As for the legs of this creature, they positively rippled with dense muscle. I was impressed by the sheer strength and might of this creature, and in awe of it as well, and I felt afraid. Part of me wanted to run, but I was terrified of moving even a finger, because this animal, I sensed, sure would hear it and quickly locate our hiding place, and then we'd be gobbled up, I was sure of that. I did notice he was sniffing the air with his nostrils, which worried me, because I know animals can pick up human smells very easily, and especially perfume and shampoo. Tonight I had been heavy-handed on the aftershave, and so I was worried that my smell would give me away. He smelt the air for a long time, and even looked in the direction of where Arabella and I were hiding, and I wondered if we knew that we were there. He stopped sniffing and continued to whistle for a long while. Then he turned around and retreated back into the forest, whistling all the way behind him. As he retreated, we heard his footsteps and the sounds of twigs snapping behind him, as well as leaves brushing against his gargantuan form. And then he was gone as swiftly as he had come. In the air that was the after smell, if you know what I mean, like you get when you go into a stable that a horse has been in overnight, or when you smell a blanket that your unwashed dog has slept in for several days. He smelt like that. It was a kind of sweaty, dirty animal smell, maybe combined with dirty trainers and smelly nappies, a kind of perfumery of these kinds of smells, so to speak. After the creature had gone, Arabella and I rushed to my car, and I accelerated the engine, and we were out of the clearing as fast as you could imagine. I drove our car to a milkshake parlour, and we drank our chocolate milkshakes in silence, neither of us saying a word, or even needing to say anything. We needed that sugar rush to keep us calm, I suppose. No, now I know why they often give very sweet tea to people who've had a shock. I dropped Arabella home that evening, kissing her on the cheek, and we said our goodbyes. But the next day at school, we both retreated to the edge of the playground to talk about what had happened the night before. "Did we really see what we saw last night?" she asked me. "Was I dreaming? Or did we really see that big hairy ape? Or what?" We did see him. "What was he?" she asked. "I have no idea. In those days we'd never heard of Sasquatches." I have to tell you, all my fears of dating Arabella were gone in an instant. We were sharing a secret, and that secret bonded us. And it bonded us so much that we became inseparable when we were at school. Anyway, we did eventually part ways when Arabella went to art college in Houston. I did not see her for several years after that, until she moved back to our hometown. One day I was behind this lady in the bakery who was wearing a large hat and a warm coat because it was a freezing day out there. 12, she said. Give me 12 of those chocolate donuts, she said. My heart nearly missed a beat. I knew that voice. Arabella, I said. She turned around and looked at me, and our eyes locked, and it was in that instant that the chemistry was revitalized and reawakened. Within 3 weeks of reuniting, we were both married in a civil ceremony at our registry office. We didn't want to wait for a moment longer than we had to. We just wanted to commit to each other for life. We are still married today, and our story is a happily ever after tale, because I'm more in love with my wife today than all those years ago. She is an extraordinary woman. We have visited our special place many times and have never seen the Sasquatch again, but we have warm feelings towards him because we associate him with our getting together as a couple and falling deeply in love. Arabella named the Sasquatch Whistler, and wherever he is, I do hope he's okay and that he's still whistling those lovely tunes today. Hope my story was of interest to you. Regards, Niles. Thank you, Niles, for that lovely story, and thank you to my listeners for listening. Until next time, good night and goodbye.